Hello YouTube, it's JT the Green Engineer. I'm going to ask you to bear with me a little bit. I got a little bit of a chest cold, but I did mention to one of my subscribers a comment that popped up on one of the videos a little while back that I would give give my thoughts on atmospheric water generators. And so I'm going to do a quick video. Now, to be fair, I'm not that well versed in them. I think I have a pretty good idea of how they work. So let's go ahead and open this up real quick. If you do like a quick search for atmospheric water generator and you just look at images, this is the kind of thing that you're going to find. A lot of boxes. There's a lot of companies out there trying to capitalize on this idea. If the question is, does this work? I would have to say resoundingly yes. I would be very surprised if anybody, would have any kind of an argument of whether or not this works. After all, this is basically taking a portion of the natural water process on the planet and basically utilizing it. If you look through here, you see basically all these are cases. They're all little boxes, but essentially the way they work is it's more or less a dehumidifier with a catch basin is how it works. A lot of the cheaper ones that you find, because you can find them on eBay. I did take a look around. I found cheaper ones on eBay for like $25 or something like that. And essentially what those do is they use Peltier modules. Now, if you don't know what a Peltier module is, it's this little wafer. Is the best way I can describe it. It's a little wafer that has two leads, a red and a black, a positive and negative. They're DC. And when you apply power through it, one side of the wafer will get cold and the other side of the wafer gets hot. Well, essentially, this is what you're doing in an atmospheric water generator. What you're going to do is you're going to lower the temperature of the air flowing over the heat exchanger, if you will, that's connected to the cold side of the Peltier module or modules. And the way that works is when the temperature drops a little bit, the moisture in the air will actually collect on the cooling fins, and essentially that's how you pull the water out of the air. You're pulling literally the humidity out of the air and causing it to collect. And then when you flip it around where you warm it back up, then it melts and then you get water. Does this work? Absolutely. It absolutely does work. How efficient is it? Okay. Now, if you're using solar or wind generation or wind power to power your Peltier module and maybe a pump, you're essentially creating free energy anyway. Is it useful? Sure. But understand also there's limitations that's going to go into that process, just like any other process, I guess. If you think about it, how efficient, how much water are you going to get? It depends on, number one, how much air volume you're moving through it, and number two, probably even more importantly, how much humidity is actually in that air that you're passing over it. If you're in a real dry climate, let's say you're in Arizona someplace where it's just really, really dry, that means there's not a lot of humidity, there's not a lot of water in that air. So the amount of water that you can extract out of it is going to be obviously much less than, let's say, if you're in Florida where it's very humid. You can pull a lot more water out of the air there. So these are things that you should take into consideration if you're thinking about either purchasing one of these things or building one yourself. It's not that hard. I wouldn't think it'd be that hard to build. Peltier modules are relatively inexpensive, and really, again, that's the gist of it. You're passing air over a cool surface where the water will collect on it. Then you're gonna reverse the temperature so that it heats up, so that it melts the ice crystals that collects on it, and those droplets will drop into a catch basin, and then you're good. How much you get, again, depends on how much humidity there is. It also depends on how big your your processes, how many Peltier modules you have, how much volume can you move through it. That's the other thing also to take into consideration is, you're going to want your flow to be right. If you run too much air past it, it's not going to have an opportunity to draw the water out of it. So you're not going to want it to go, too fast over the cooling fins, and you're not going to want it to go too slow either. So in that regard, like I said, yeah, you can do it with Peltier modules. I was kind of kicking around the idea. There's another way to do it. So as an example, one thing to take into consideration is like geothermal. Okay, so if you're at a place where you're not in a mobile setup like I would be in the box truck, let's say you have a little homestead someplace, then absolutely, this is something you can do relatively easy because you can use the temperature below the frost line to your advantage. Number one, if I'm not mistaken, the temperature below the frost line is 55 degrees year round. You pump air through a coil where it can be cooled, and you put like a small catch tank at the bottom with a pump, and you just basically have an air pump that forces the air through there. It's going to cool, it'll collect on the surface area of the tube. The water will collect there and it'll drip down, and it will never freeze. It'll be quite cool, but it won't freeze. 55 degrees, right? Anyway, you can do something like that, and you could actually build a pretty good size one where you could process quite a bit of water. And I don't believe that would be all that difficult to do. Like I said, design. All you're really trying to do is lower the air temperature and getting the air itself to come into contact with the surface area of the tube. If you can do that, have it swirl around, it's going to pull that water out of it, and that water will collect with the change in temperature, and gravity is going to do its thing. It'll work its way down. So if you're on a homestead or something like that, absolutely, it's something worth looking into, I think. You're going to need, again, variables. How much air or how much water is in the air where you're at is going to dictate how much you can get. And again, how big your apparatus is, what's its capacity. And that's going to vary depending, again, on where you're at and how efficient your system is. But I don't believe there's any reason under the sun that you can't. Do I think it's a good idea? I think it's a great idea. Would I drink it, right after it's been harvested? I would probably still run it through a filter. I would probably still distill it with a solar distiller for nothing else, just to be a bit more on the safe side. But yeah, I think they're a great idea, and it's definitely something I might look into. Given that the box truck that I'm working on is a mobile, kind of application, then I will probably be looking into like Peltier modules. But again, it all depends on the overall situation. You know what I mean? My box truck is also going to be on solar primarily. I do plan on putting in other means of power generation, but primarily it'll be solar and possibly wind. I would like to create a pyrolyzer or something like that where I can run a generator off of like wood or biogas or something to that effect. But the Peltier modules, they don't draw a crazy amount of power, but they do draw power. And again, depending on how big your system is, it's going to dictate how much power you're going to draw out of it. So I think it's really going to come down to taking a good look at your particular situation and seeing whether or not it's viable. I don't have any numbers that I can toss out at you what I would consider to be viable, because quite frankly I haven't really experimented with it at all to see what you get. But like I said, Peltier modules are pretty cheap. I don't believe it would be all that difficult to create or build an enclosure for it, ductwork. basically to direct the airflow where it needs to go. And here's another thing too. I want to present to those of you out there who have kind of played around with Peltier modules. Peltier modules are DC, if I'm not mistaken. And in that regard, I guess my question, because I honestly haven't looked into it all that much, can you reverse polarity on that? Can you switch the positive and negative and actually change which side gets hot and which side gets cold? I think you can, but I'm not absolutely certain. I don't know if the actual Peltier module in itself kind of works like a diode, where you pretty much only got one direction for flow, or if you can actually flip it backwards and have it go the other way. If you could do that, that would be great, because really, you run it for a little while, you cool off the cooling fins, it ices up, or starts collecting ice, then you flip the polarity, then you heat it up so that all that ice, drips off, then you flip it back and you start producing. Just have it go back and forth, on a timer or something like that. Would actually work pretty well, I think. Please leave your comments down below. If you've messed around with Peltier modules, leave the information down below, because like I said, I'm pretty sure that most of the cheap ones that you find on eBay, I believe that's the way they work with Peltier modules. But like I said, let me know what you think about the geothermal idea too, because I really believe that would probably work pretty well if you had a place where you could do it. For those of you that are homesteading already, that might be something fun, that if you wanted to work on that, put one of those, build one of those and then put the video up, and let us know how it works. But to Mr. Gordy, who I did say that I would make this video for. Yeah, I think atmospheric water generators are a good idea. Now, as far as efficiency, I don't really know, because I've not messed around with it myself. And like I said, there's other variables that go into it. So if you do decide you want to mess around with it a little bit, please come back and let us know, what your findings are. What did you find out about them? If you decide to build one, that'd be cool too. I'd like to see your build. I may at some point in time, try a build myself, using most likely Peltier modules, or thermal electric generators. That's TEGs, TEGs, is the other thing that they're called. I think Peltiers are actually made more, if I'm not mistaken, they are primarily for the thermal aspects of it. Not to generate electricity, because you can't actually go the other way. You can, create a differential between each side of the, Peltier wafer, if you will, and the difference between the two, the greater the difference between the two, the more electricity it generates. So that's also one thing that's really, really cool about Peltier modules. But the TEGs are more adept, from my understanding, at creating electricity. Whereas your standard Peltier modules they're kind of designed for the thermal aspects of it, to apply power to it and actually get that temperature differential. So in a situation like for atmospheric water generators or anything that you want to heat or cool, you would probably use a standard Peltier. But anyway, like I said, please leave your comments down below. I don't know how helpful this was, but I wanted to get something out there for you. Just basically thoughts, kicking some thoughts around about, some different technologies out there, and let people know that, there's these things they're out there, and there's things that you can do. So that's kind of a neat one. Probably wouldn't hurt to have one in a prepping kind of situation, because if nothing else, you'll always have at least some water being able to be generated, especially if you run it off of some kind of renewable, solar or wind, would work really well for something like that. So in any case, like I said, leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think, guys. And stay tuned. We're gonna be tearing into the box truck here before too long. It's supposed to be warming up here really soon. If I can get a break from work, then we'll be tearing into that. So definitely stay tuned for that. Thanks a lot for watching, and stay tuned for future videos, guys.